Well, we got a touch of fall in New England, a hurricane well out to sea, and some pretty heavy rain areas forecast for the central United States. Let's get started. Hi, I'm meteorologist Ted Keller. We'll start on this Saturday by taking a look at the visible satellite loop right in the middle of the day. You can see the edges of that tropical storm that is soon to be a hurricane. One system in the central U.S. is probably taking up most of the limelight right now. We'll dive a little bit more into that one here. The west is pretty quiet, actually. They could use some rain in some areas. Now, at the upper levels, the 500 millibar level, we still have this trough of low pressure. So when these lines dip southward like this, that's a trough. And these are generally associated with rain. Often temperature patterns associated with them do. It tends to be cooler underneath and on the backside, and a little bit warmer perhaps along and ahead of such a feature. It's not a real strong trough as compared to, let's say, the one that's off the map off to the northeast here in eastern Canada, but it is enough to affect the weather for sure. And it is still kind of a gentle pattern. The winds in the upper atmosphere are not blowing that strong. However, there are some pretty significant changes. Let's go back and touch on that touch of fall. And it really is a touch of fall, and it is pretty isolated. But you can see this is the low temperature map as forecast by the National Weather Service. Now, just to be clear, the colors are departures from normal. So where you see a bluish color, it means, hey, those temperatures are a little bit below what's expected this time of year. And the actual numbers are the low temperature forecast by the various National Weather Service offices. This is for tomorrow morning, but we can take a closer look. Bangor, Maine, a little coastal, so they won't get quite as cold at 36, but we're looking at lots of 30s up here. Below freezing is basically where the blue colors are, and so there is a reason why there is a freeze warning in effect for about the northern two-thirds of Maine and a significant part of the northern parts of New Hampshire and Vermont, even some interior areas of upstate New York with frost advisories surrounding that. So a little corner of the U.S. is getting cool. It's not the trend, however. I'll talk about that here in a minute. But let's take a look now at high temperatures as we go through the next couple of days. So this is Sunday. Again, the greenish blue colors. The west is kind of cool, below normal. So is much of the coastal areas of the mid-Atlantic states and up to New England. And then look what's happening here. A little patch of cool. This begins to grow as we look at the high temperatures on Tuesday. 2 days later, we're only seeing 64 in Denver, Cheyenne, 60 degrees. Dodge City only 74, only 77 in my town here in Springfield. So the cool air is kind of growing. I'll show you why in a second. And then it begins to morph and move even more. By Thursday, we have a large pool of below normal temperatures here in the central U.S., still a little bit in the east, very much so in the coastal areas of the west, even in the interior areas. Keep in mind, though, that when it shows below normal, that a 97-degree high there in Southern California is considered below normal for this time of year and that location. Pretty hot in the northern plains with 80 showing up in Montana, almost into the 80s in parts of North Dakota. Let me show you the 500 millibar mean starts next week. And what this basically shows you, again, troughs of low pressure are when these lines dip southward. So this is an anomaly. So it just means that compared to what we see this time of year going back, over, I believe it's a 30-year period, this is just a little bit of an abnormal trough. Not hugely abnormal, but it just shows you that typically we would see something with higher heights, maybe a little warmer here. This, on the other hand, represents a rise in the heights. So in other words, they're bending northward a little bit against the normal for that area as well. Now, take a look at temperatures. And as I said a few frames ago, you tend to get cooler temperatures behind troughs. So that's where these departures are showing up at the surface. And you tend to get warmer temperatures out ahead of them. And then where you have high pressure a lot, it's warmer. And that's what's happening in Canada. So even though I've been talking about a cool patch in the central U.S. and that little cold snap in New England, the overall trend in the 6 to 10 day period, this starts Thursday of the coming week here, is still for much of the country to be trending very much above normal. High confidence that the Dakotas, parts of Montana, the Great Lakes will be above normal as well. And they just released the October forecast too for temperature. And in a reversal of what I just showed you, these areas here are not forecast to be above normal, even though over the next 6 to 10 days they are. And then New England's kind of reversing course, and it's going to be a little toasty, as well as southern Florida and much of the southwestern U.S. Well, certainly on the precipitation front, all eyes are on this glob here in the central U.S. We'll focus in on that real quick here and take a look at that. And we're seeing if it's yellow, it's a 4-inch band. If it's that kind of next color down right here, that's a 5-inch band. So northeast Oklahoma getting in on some of that. And we'll zoom in even more in here in just a second. But I did want to show you that for Tuesday, it'll be raining between now and Tuesday in many of these areas. But by Tuesday, the Weather Service has determined that enough rain will have fallen that any additional rain may push the meter on a flash flood guidance, a flash flood warning. So at least a 15% chance of that happening in an area that is almost perfectly defined as the Ozarks. Some dispute about that, but it's pretty close. Anyway, and I live there, so I'm going to zoom in on that real quick here. I already did a heads-up weather for our area yesterday. This just kind of puts a fine point on that. So up the interstate here is where some of the heaviest rain is going to fall, with Springfield forecast over the next 5 days to get 4.2 inches. Same for Rolla, same for Joplin, as a matter of fact. And again, these are 5-inch areas here. Could be some of those in the Ozarks. What's the trend? Well, Thursday through Monday, the southeast looks fairly wet. It's not a real high confidence, but it's there. So is much of southern Arizona, and a little dry in the northern plains. And again, as I mentioned, the October forecast is out. So the areas from Texas northward into Missouri are looking a little dry. Maybe some of the corners of the country, like in Washington and maybe in southern Florida, that's been very wet lately, by the way, will continue that trend into October, at least according to the Climate Prediction Center's latest forecast. Of course, the last thing we'll look at is this tropical system out in the Atlantic. Here's the visible satellite loop. We have a front here, and the trough of low pressure associated with that is what's steering this tropical storm eventually back to the north and to the northeast. It is a tropical storm right now, Gabrielle. It just over the last couple of hours has seen a little bit of explosive growth here. So this is, again, color-coded temperature inferring height. So when it's colder, it's inferred that the cloud is warmer. That works perfectly for this. No dispute here. And so you're looking at this thing intensifying a little bit more. As a matter of fact, Gabrielle is forecast to be a hurricane by tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. And as it's doing the curve, it'll miss Bermuda, which is right here, still become a hurricane for quite a bit of its life as it curves back out, moving almost due east toward Wednesday and Thursday. What's coming on the heels? Not too impressive, really. They're watching this area of disturbed weather over the next 7 days, 30% chance or less that once it gets its act together and moves more to the west-northwest, that something could develop here, but not a great chance. This right here is the long-range forecast that was issued Tuesday, and it's pretty much showing Gabrielle here. And then the next one on the list, which would be Humberto, would be something that forms in that slight risk I just showed you, not very great, 30%. But here we've gone through all these names, so we've gone through 7 names so far. Humberto would be the next name on the list. So we have 7 named storms. The hurricane forecast is for 13 to 18 named storms, so we're only at about half of what they expected. Hurricanes, we've had 1, soon to have 2 in all likelihood, and only 1 major one so far. That was Aaron. This is the season where every single storm so far has followed the red track. The worry is that they'll go too far west. So far, we have so many troughs coming across the northern U.S. that many of these storms have been curved back out to sea. We also need to watch the Gulf for stalled fronts because the sea surface temperatures in the Gulf are pretty high. And we'll also show you that while the peak of hurricane season was back around September 10th or so, right in this area here, we still have plenty of hurricanes that can form well into October. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Thanks for watching this edition of Weather to Watch. It comes out every other day, or as the weather necessitates. Please remember to share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel, or at the very least, like what you just watched. Thanks.